the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
All right, hello. Welcome back. Chase Thomas Podcast, taping this on a Wednesday afternoon. We've got a first-timer, John Wilkerson, 991, the sports animal, voice of the Tennessee Vols baseball team. Hello, win column. We've got John Wilkerson on the Chase Thomas Podcast for the first time. John, good afternoon. How are you?
Doing fine, Chase. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you for being here. How did you first come up with that? Did you workshop different things that you, when you were first getting the voice of the Vols, that you were thinking about, like, how do I want to close this game? Is that the one that came up the most of, like, how do I want to sign off a Tennessee victory?
That was something that developed over time. Of full transparency, I was a big fan of the Texas Rangers because I could pick up their games here in Knoxville. Mm-hmm. And so Mark Holtz was the voice of the Rangers, and that's how I used to cap Texas Rangers victories, was Hello Win column. And he passed away, unfortunately, in the late 90s. And so as I continued to get deeper and deeper into my run, it was probably about the mid-2000s that I started to sprinkle it in. Well, actually, I guess it would be, it'd be the early 2010s. So it was just something that Tennessee wasn't doing a whole lot of winning. So I thought that'd be a nice way to just a tip of the cap, a tribute to Mark. And then at the same time, just to mark a Tennessee victory. And so it really came into full-time use probably about 10 or 11 years ago in terms of what I do with the Vols.
I love that. Is there, because one of the things that's so fascinating to me about like that being able to do that at an elite level is, I think from the outside looking in, and like my broadcasting is very different, and I look at what you do excellently, and one of the things that I think is so hard to do is knowing when to take pauses, when to take breaks, when to be boisterous, when to be subtle. Is that something that you just get used to as time goes on? Was it somebody you modeled after? Was it the Rangers? Was it different things that you just kind of grew up listening to baseball on the radio that you kind of naturally knew when to kind of go up and down? Because that always, that to me is just so fascinating, because I think it's just got to be so difficult to know when and where. Like, and now I'm sure that it's just very easy because you've gotten so many reps. But before, I'm curious.
Well, as you do mention, I mean, not only was it I used to get the sporting news, the preseason Major League Baseball magazine, and I would just, as an exercise, take the AM radio to the best part of the house, which was the a living room corner, right, the front, and I would just see how many different broadcasts I could get, how many different teams I could get. And so the fact that I could reach all the way down to Dallas, Fort Worth, that was something, and I enjoyed the pace of play. Now, as far as sitting in my seat, there were a lot of different paths and different considerations and things along those lines. I had the chance to work with Mike Keith. He was the voice of Tennessee baseball before I got to occupy that chair, and so working with Mike, influenced by his approach as well as his delivery, and at the same time, you always want to be true to yourself. But there were some good lessons learned along the way. One of the ones that was the toughest, but it makes the most sense, is realizing that, and I used to think you had to call it as soon as it happened. And for me, it was realizing that you can take a breath. Instead of perhaps getting in front of yourself and trying to call the action as it happens, you can take just the slightest beat, process what's going on, and then relay it, because the vast majority of your listeners aren't watching or there. So they're listening. They're allowing you to paint the picture for them. And so knowing that I didn't have to say that it was a hot grounder to short, immediately to second, and on to first in time for the double play, you could go ahead and say it was a backhanded stab as he's going to his right towards third. Great play, strong throw, and then, and gets the runner by a step. You have the opportunity just to catch your breath for a quick second, because you control the pace. You get to do that. And it took me a little while to really have that sink in, because you can't help the reflexes to call it as it happens. I mean, immediately. But the longer that you get to sit there and realize that you can set a pace, bring good energy, and at the same time know that you've got a little wiggle room, that's it's a significant comfort, and it's something that I do appreciate the opportunity to do.
Do you remember what you were feeling when Aaron Combs went in?
As far as game three,
Game three, yes. Like, do
yeah.
you remember what that feeling was like? Because I remember what it was like for me, but you're calling the game. Do you remember just what you were feeling? You're like, okay, let's see if he can do this. Let's see. It's on short rest. Like, can he get out of this inning? And can Tennessee pull this off? Do you remember what you were feeling?
Well, I was thinking a lot of the same things. The fact that it was a very short turnaround, but at the same time, he had been so effective. And to look at what the season was like for Aaron was remarkable, because as it starts, he's working much earlier in games than he used to, and he actually even started a game.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a little while for him to hit his stride. And I actually think that it was in a loss at Auburn that he really took the step forward and kind of inserted himself into the season as he was expected to be. And so the fact that you just look at what this Tennessee team had done the entire year, they lose the first game of the series, they rally to win the second game and force the winner take all Monday night showdown. And then lo and behold, it was just a squad that everybody embraced the opportunity to do their part. And so while I was curious to see exactly how strong the velocity would be or what the bite of the breaking stuff would be, I was also very confident that you had somebody that had done what Aaron had done already to help Tennessee be in this position. And so I was very confident that he would get it done. But like you, it's kind of like, does he need the extra mile an hour if indeed it's 95 as opposed to 97? But yeah, I was just so confident in what Tennessee was going to be able to do to finish that game that I couldn't wait to see how it unfolded.
How do you think Tony Vitello has changed the most since he first got to Tennessee to now?
Wow, that's a good question. I do think that he's very patient, and I also think that he is somebody who does such a good job of allowing the incredible assistants and staffers around him to do what they do. And I don't think that was ever a problem for him, but I do think that he was kind of working at a frenetic pace. He was driving perhaps about 5 miles an hour faster than he needed to. So I think there's been just a steady confidence that has built, and also the fact that he is somebody who can go with the flow. I think that perhaps is a little bit different. And I also think that he, for lack of a better word, has calmed down. Because in seeing that, and I do think that the program fed off of his energy, and I'll never forget so early on. And in fact, it might have been going back to his first ever series as Tennessee's coach against Maryland, that there's a disputed play at first and he sprints out of the dugout. I mean, it would have been nice to see what his 40 time was at that point in time, but he sprints to the umpire and starts to argue. And I think he got a nice little nod from the umpire. It's like, don't do that again. And so, but I just think he was this ball of energy. And I think as his tenure has unfolded and it has grown, I think he has matured as a coach. I think he has evolved as somebody who would have an impact on exactly what the approach is, whether it's in the batter's box, on the mound, or in the field. And so I think that he has allowed himself to breathe. And the fact that his team has followed that lead is what made last year so impressive, because they had no use for what they had done the day before, and they weren't going to worry about what might be the situation they face tomorrow. Everything was about what you do right here, right now. And he worked so hard from the time he arrived to help redevelop his players as much from the neck up as anything physically in working in, strength and conditioning or in the weight room, different things like that. I just think that it's a very strong mental approach. It's one that you have faith in what you've done to prepare yourself for this moment, and then just playing ball. So I think that his biggest change is he's been able to slow down just a bit. I mean, he runs 24/7, but I think he's been able to just slow his miles per hour down a significant amount. And it's as much the game coming to him and realizing, all right, here's what I have to do, but I'll be ready when the time comes.
Interesting. Did you think, before the year, because I was going back and before doing this here with you, John, I was thinking back to how I felt about where this team was. Because, this is the best run in Tennessee baseball over the last 4 years. And we had different feelings coming into different years. And it's kind of funny. Like, I think the strongest preseason national buzz was the most arduous of the 4 years for Tennessee in 2023. But when you think back to 2024 and what you were feeling coming into the year, did it feel like they would be the number one overall seed, that they would win the SEC tournament, that they would just be the first team to win a national title as the number one overall seed in 25 years? Did that feel like a realistic possibility? Like you were that certain that this team was going to be the team that got over the hump based on who they were bringing in?
It's hard for a program that had never done it to think that you were going to open the season and say, yep, this is where they become the first Tennessee team to win a national championship. Mm-hmm. I liked what they had going. And I think what you learned in 2023 is that, and I wish more fans would have this approach, is there's the benefit of the doubt. Because to experience what you did in 2023 and now get ready for 2024, I just don't see how you couldn't go ahead and say, you look at how hard this staff worked to adjust on the fly, because 2023 was not easy. You're expected to follow up on 2022. You were the best team ever that didn't win anything in regards to not even getting out of your super regional. But at that point in time, you have the nation's best pitching rotation as viewed from 2022 to 2023. And then it's just not clicking. And so you're 5-10 at the break. You make the adjustments you do. Chase Burns goes from the starting rotation to the bullpen. And then you get that so imperative series win against Vanderbilt week 6. And that allowed Tennessee to springboard. They wind up going to the second College World Series with this staff in 3 years. And so they won a game. And while there were hopes that they would do more, you knew that you had to replace Chase Dollander. You knew you had to replace Chase Burns, who had departed and had gone to Wake Forest. And then you had Drew Beam. So I do think it was curious to see with the additions from the portal, who was going to play what roles and who was going to step up where and when. But you love the fact that you had a lot of third-year guys, because Drew Beam was there in 2022 as a freshman. Same for Christian Moore, same for Blake Burke. And you had added some really nice pieces in Billy Amick. So I think there was reason for optimism, and especially for the way that you had punctuated 2023. I was optimistic about 2024, and I was expecting Tennessee to be in the position it had been the year before, and that's another trip to Omaha, something they had never done in back-to-back years. I thought they had a chance, but I also fully understood why there were other teams in the Southeastern Conference that were thought to be in better shape than the Vols going into the season.
I also think back, I have you just stuck in the back of my mind during my wife and I, we were on our way to a Nashville weekend getaway, and we're driving down the road, and I'm listening to you call Tennessee Texas A&M in 23. And I remember, because this was right around when you're talking about when it kind of flipped 5-10 in SEC play, like it's not working. Like there's just something off. And the Burns experience was just that's a whole conversation for another day. But Andrew Lindsey, kind of the forgotten guy, that's when he broke out. And I remember listening, because I think he had a bases loaded jam. He got out, and I think there were no outs when he came in, and he just calmed the storms. And then that was it. It was like from that moment on, this was the Andrew Lindsey show. And I think that was a huge part of 2023 kind of getting back on track, was that what he was able to do against A&M. Do you remember that series in that moment? Because it's really stuck in my mind, listening to you talk about like getting out of the jam and just what that was for Lindsey and his confidence, and for Tennessee it's like, oh, we may have something here. We may have something with Andrew Lindsey here. We might need to lean into this a little bit more.
Yeah, he moved into the Friday slot, and it was because he competed the way he did. It was the desire that he showed on the mound. One of the things that Tony Vitello has always hoped for with his team is that he wants you to play with emotion, but he doesn't want you to play emotionally. So you can't let what is going on, either in your favor or not, at the plate impact what your approach is going to be, either on the mound or in the field defensively. So you don't want anything to be under your skin. And so while you want guys, he just said that there was such a desire to win from Lindsey that there was no better place for him than to set the tone going into a weekend. And so I think that was something that came earlier in that first half of the schedule against Florida, to where it's like, I want my guys to have that kind of sense of urgency. And at the same time, it's not that there's anything wrong with playing like your hair is on fire. It's just that every now and then it's going to get the better of you. So it was playing with fire, but at the same time, not getting too emotionally wrapped up in it. And I thought he was the perfect guy. He's, as you mentioned, he's one of the forgotten members, does not get as much of the spotlight or the credit that he deserves for what he meant to that team and really helping settle down the pitching rotation as well as setting an impressive tone for each of those second half series.
Absolutely. When you think of just the guys that you were able to watch last year, and I mean, there's a lot of turnover from the national title team to this year, specifically in the lineup. Who are you going to miss calling the most that you just enjoyed watching, and you're just like, man, I'm really not going to watch him play in a Tennessee uniform anymore?
That's a really good question because there are just so many guys. You take a look. I mean, you had 5 guys that hit 20 or more home runs, and to know how rare that was for Tennessee. I mean, you had been a little more than a half dozen in the history of the program that had ever done it, let alone 5 in the same season. And so you can just go around. I mean, you appreciate what the pitching staff thought of, how the high regard they had for Cal Stark and what he meant to the team. Just the way he handled the staff. Anything you got from him at the plate was entirely gravy, but he was also somebody who could wreck the other side if the situation presented itself. Blake Burke, loved the fact that he was a power-hitting freshman and mostly a designated hitter for his first 2 years at Tennessee. And then you look at how he worked so hard to turn himself into not just a defender at first, but a plus defender at first base and anchoring the infield. And you can just go around. Christian Moore, the same thing. I mean, he and Blake split time in their spot in the lineup as freshmen. And then lo and behold, here they are each doing things. They both at one point held the record in terms of Tennessee's career home runs. So it would really be tough. Dylan Dreiling, of course, how masterful he was in turning himself into a hitter against left-handed pitchers when he was 0 for the first year that he got some serious looks as a freshman, to then hitting more than 380 against left-handers the next year. And I mean, I guess if you look for one, it would be to see the steady influence and impact. I thought Drew Beam, what he meant to this team from the time he arrived on campus. And he was somebody who'd been banged up a little bit in high school. So I think that kind of tempered expectations. But for him to be the Sunday slot guy in 2022, have so many big weekends that were riding on his shoulders. If I had to pick one, it would probably be Drew, but at the same time, there are a lot of 1As, Bs, and Cs that come into this conversation. But I just love the way that we got to see last year's team be the capping achievement for the guys that arrived here to do exactly what they did, and that's win championships, because Tennessee, I think, won a total of 6 trophies when all was said and done last year. But anyhow, I just love the way everything culminated because they worked so well together.
And maybe the last of that 3-year run guys, right? With Burke and Simo. I mean, Vitello's talked about that. Like, we'll see. I mean, that's one of the more confusing things, John, I got to tell you, is not figuring out who's draft eligible after 2, who's 3. Because those 3, when you have 3 years to kind of, part of the reason that I think Simo and Burke are just going to be so beloved by Tennessee forever is that you saw them progress. I mean, that's the thing that's still just, you can't replace that. Like the 1-year runs in the portal, like Amick was really good for you last year, but it's different. Like Amick, like obviously you have the clap and everything, so that will always live on, but it's just different because you saw Simo and Burke go from not really playing to playing a little bit more to them being the stars of a national title team. Like, it's just, you're not going to see that very often, I think, in college baseball going forward. And I kind of wonder where things go in that regard, because Dean Curley, I think, is very much a possibility of being the best player on Tennessee this year, and he's draft eligible after 2 years. So you might only get 2 of Dean Curley here, and it's just kind of, it is what it is. That it's not a fault of any of the guys. It's just trying to keep up with who's a 2-year guy and who's a 3-year guy. But I wish we had more 3-year guys, I guess, is a long way of what I'm saying, John, because it was more special, I think, for Simo and Burke because of that.
Yeah, and just think about the guys like Xander Sechrest. That was his senior year. Kirby Connell, who had been here the year before Xander arrived. And you got to see those guys just continue to grow in terms of their ability on the mound, as well as the faith that the staff had in them to go out and get the job done. What Xander Sechrest did last year, I think it is the greatest 6 consecutive starts that any college pitcher at any point in time has probably executed, because Tennessee either advanced to something specific or won something specific each and every time he went out. His numbers were off the charts, and you just knew when you started the game with him on the mound it was going to be fine for Tennessee. And so, again, there are so many great stories, but you're right. Length of service in the uniform is something that will create not just fan appreciation, but I think for some guys, it's kind of Big Orange Country legend status.
Who are you most fired up to see this year, John? Who have you circled that you're like, I'm really excited to call some games for him in 10 days?
Well, like everybody else, I can't wait to see this team take the field because you just know, all right, you hear about Liam Doyle. You got to see him last year as he pitched for Ole Miss. He's somebody that they kind of say right now might be the guy who's the tone setter on Fridays. Then you have Andrew Fisher, who makes the move also from Oxford to Knoxville. You have to replace some big bats because not only, again, you replace all 5 guys that hit 20 or more home runs. Gavin Keelan from Louisville, he was probably the most highly regarded prospect that left the program, an accomplished one like Louisville, to come to Tennessee. So anxious to see that. And at the same time, love the way that Dean Curley competed as a freshman from start to finish. So I look forward to seeing whether or not he has advanced his game, or I should say how he has advanced his game. Hunter Ensley, I think it's perfect that while there was the opportunity to perhaps pursue pro ball, why leave when you're having so much fun wearing the orange and white? And for somebody who had to wait until his body was ready after how he wrecked it as a high school quarterback, to then get out there and contribute the way he did, especially with the momentous plays that he made in a huge couple of instances out in Omaha, what a way for him to ride off into the sunset. And then you also have one of the guys who's probably been the most decorated and recognized going from last season to this season, Nate Snead. He was somebody who was thought to be your closer. That never really materialized because he was so good in long relief as he kind of teamed up with Drew Beam on Saturdays. But I just think that he has the potential. He has starter stuff if indeed that's how they want to use him, or he is somebody who might work in consecutive games as he did to help Tennessee close out its run to its first ever national championship. If you've got freshmen, you've got such highly regarded freshmen. Tegan Coons, I think, is a very impressive right-hander who's got a chance and will likely be in the weekend rotation. And then at the same time, Jay Abernathy might be one of the most highly rated players that Tennessee's been able to get to campus since somebody like Christian Moore. Completely different players, but still such an incredible amount of talent for such a young man. So, again, you won't lack for people to point to in the orange and white because they know that there's going to be opportunity to get out there and compete and be the best of the best against the best of the best.
Yeah, I'm excited about Abernathy. Everybody you talk to about Abernathy, it's like he's different. He's also someone just Tennessee fans have not seen because I think, like you said, he's not SEMO. He's not. I mean, he's a souped-up version of Seth Stevenson, I think, in a lot of ways. And
I like that comparison.
I like you just haven't had that. I mean, Tennessee's had to figure it out. I mean, SEMO was an Acuna type leadoff guy last year. Mauyahuna, I don't think was a natural leadoff guy 2 years prior. That never really materialized. But you just kind of look at it and you're like, Tennessee's never really had like the traditional just on base, speedy, just he can hit the ball, spray the ball anywhere type of guy. And it's Abernathy, but putting that on a true freshman, I don't know. Is he that talented that you're comfortable just rolling him out as a leadoff guy? Do you put him in the 9 hole just so that he can, if he does get on base, then you have your top hitters right there to push him around the 1 and 2 spot to kind of ease him into the fold there? I'm very fascinated, like you, to see what Abernathy looks like for Tennessee because that left field spot seems still like the one that's most open coming into the 2020-25 season. Because I don't know if you're like this, John, but I would have loved if we could have just gotten one of Dreiling or Tiers back for this year. Just one, like just one of them back. It like losing them both just hurts because I just think that is so much production from a year ago, and to lose Burke, to lose SEMO, to lose Dreiling, to lose Tiers, to lose Amick, that is a whole lot of firepower. And if you just Dreiling back in left field would have solved as a 1 year just final, just to ease this next guys, the Levi Clarks, the Stone Lawlesses, the Jay Abernathys, to kind of blend just kind of get us through this year to get back to superpower mode here in 26. I don't know. I don't know if you felt like that at all, but like Dreiling, if I could have anybody back from last year's team, it'd actually be Dreiling because I just think that spot, if you have that cleared up, because then you're just Dreiling, Inslee, Chapman, that makes a lot of sense. That's a lot of upside. And then everything in the infield, I think, is going to take care of itself too. So I don't know. I would have loved Dreiling back for one more year.
It would have been fantastic. And like you said, it's hard to get used to. You only got 2 years with him.
Yeah.
But it is unfortunately the lay of the land. And boy, credit to Dylan for turning himself into the very highly regarded prospect he is now with the Texas Rangers, because that's one of the things that probably also didn't get as much spotlight as it should have. And that's just the incredible amount of hours that both Dylan and Kavares poured into their games. I mean, for Kavares Tears, just to think that he has 2 home runs the year before and was also a little bit banged up from time to time. But I mean, he did so much to reshape himself physically, and then all of the hours that he put in the cage, he just tormented opposing pitchers, and then also turned himself into, like Blake Burke, a plus defender in the outfield. So yeah, I do think that it would have been awesome to have both. But I mean, Dylan or KT to be back one more year, because just something to it be less of a shock to the system that all 5 have to move on.
Final thing here, and I'll let you go, John. I'm curious with how much you're talking. You're doing the morning show. You're doing Tennessee baseball here. Do you have any like pregame tricks? Do you have any rituals to keep the voice intact? Are you a big tea guy? Are you a big like just voice exercise person? What do you do now that we're getting into your busiest season, John? How do you keep the voice intact?
It was a few years ago that as a nightly routine, my wife started making us tea at night with honey in it. And every now and then, even regardless of what you do to try and keep yourself between the lines as you go from one to the next, things can get gummed up. I haven't tried it yet, but I heard Mike Keith talk about one of the ways to work past that is pineapple juice. So I do like to have that perhaps in the ready should it be necessary, but I do drink at least 1 cup of warm tea a day with a little bit of honey in it. And thankfully, and also try to stay hydrated. Water always helps.
Wait, what kind of tea are we talking here? Are we talking black tea? Are we talking what kind of tea? Earl Grey? What are we going with, John?
I'm more of a green tea guy, and I will also enjoy the flavors that whether it's a peach or a mango, pomegranate, elderberry and stuff like that. My wife is more of the English breakfast tea, the Earl Grey, the Lady Earl. So she goes more with the straight up teas, and I kind of like to have just a little bit of a sense of flavor.
There you go. I love it. John Wilkerson, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at 991 The Sports Animal this week? And when we'll hear you back on the Tennessee baseball airwaves? Next week. It's almost here. Strap in, John.
A week from Friday. I mean, Valentine's Day is when it starts, and I can't wait to see everything that goes into Hofstra being here. Can't wait also to see what Lindsey Nelson Stadium will be like at the time they pause the construction and the expansion just to let folks through the gates. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done, but we'll start out with the broadcast on utsports.com. We will pick up our coverage on the Sports Animal probably about a week or so away from conference play. And, of course, Lady Vols basketball, Tennessee Volunteers basketball, that can always knock us back to either the app and or utsports.com. But, I mean, there's just so much going on. You've got the Lady Vols in the top 20, the Tennessee Volunteers in the top 5. Softball starts this week. So we're going to be busy, and folks are going to be able to find it one way, shape, or form, either through Sports Animal, the Sports Animal, or through the UT Game Day app and utsports.com. But, Chase, I sure do appreciate the conversation, and thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you, John, and this was great. I appreciate you making the time, and good luck this season. We'll have to check back in again soon.
Please do. Anytime. I sure do appreciate it, and thank you.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.